How's your night going?
Very good, thank you, sir.
Take us to the back entrance of the gallery on West 12th, and we can skip the line. Where are you from?
I am from Kampala, in Uganda.
It's a long way from home.
This is my home now.
Came here for asylum. That's your story, and you're sticking to it.
I just want to remember all the good times, you know?
Hi, my name is Dwayne Hanson Fernandez, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about our short film, A Place to Fall Down. A Place to Fall Down was created as a response to something we all experience, especially recently, which is grief and loneliness. And that was something I think that I've experienced throughout my life, but when the pandemic happened, it was a thing that we all experienced. And it was something that was not, unique to me, but everyone could experience that. And same with grief. I think that there are fortunate people who were able to get through the pandemic without experiencing grief. But for the most part, we were all touched by it in some capacity. And there was this feeling of it globally. And so trying to create a very subtle story that touched on those things was the inspiration behind wanting to do this film. I also love hope, and I think that a big part of it was ending on hope and not ending on the brutality of the human experience. I wanted to show that the world is a magical place and that people can remind us of that if we can't find it in ourselves, and how the little things can have a profound impact on somebody's life.
If you want to do sports, you gotta fight for it.
75% of disabled kids not doing physical exercise within school. That's a big number.
Okay, I'm in a wheelchair. Why should I be treated differently?
When you remove a child out of PE, you're removing their right to the full range of the education curriculum.
I love boxing because it makes me feel good,
I felt really happy.
You can change a child's life doing that.
Some people that call me Eric Garner's mother, some people call me Gwen Carr. There's no sense in someone else telling it and you being an extra in your own story. And the only way to do that was for me to get out there and speak his name.
Тут залетіла сюди ракета.
Once upon a time in Ukraine.
Тут був порог, і тут була двері в хату.
Все были дни страшные. Не было самого страшного, они все были самые страшные. Он жив. Приедет. Может, он просто сильно поранился. Он забыл, хто ми такі.
Я боявся, що вони могли сказати, проїжджайте, а там потім все одно вони застрелять.
Більшість малюнків
як я малювала при окупації. Так би, щоб не зламати свій такий дух, щоб надалі вірити в Україну.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve Pond from TheWrap. Thank you for coming, and I'm very pleased to introduce 3 of our filmmakers who will be here in person and 3 more who will be up on the screen. From A Place to Fall Down, Dwayne Hanson Fernandez, director. From Her Fight, His Name, the story of Gwen, Carr, and Eric Garner, director Brad Bailey. And from Once Upon a Time in Ukraine, director Betsy West. John Gray, Melissa Jo Peltier from A Guest in My Country. And Lily Ari Siegel from Equal Play. Welcome to the filmmakers in the seats and the giant heads above us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I just want to start with, and hear the origin stories here. I mean, these are, 5 different but very powerful films. And so what led you here? Dwayne?
I think coming out of the pandemic, I wanted to tell a story about grief and loneliness. And I didn't imagine that a 2-hour narrative would be something that was very captivating to people. And the short format at 15 minutes was something that I was really intrigued by. And so on New Year's Day, I kind of sat down and knocked out a story that was very personal to me and my experiences. And here we are now.
So, I mean, is that tricky as a filmmaker when you are delving into something that's personal?
Yeah, I'd written 3 other features, and you put a little of yourself in characters, and I'd never put so much myself into a character, and that was tricky. That was a very complicated thing to do, but it was something that over the last 2 years, from making it to sharing it with people, that has become something I can't even describe how special it is when people share their stories with me, and it creates a connection and a conversation.
So, Brad, what led you to Gwen and to wanting to make a movie?
Thanks, Steve. In 2017, I saw a news article. I was actually at the oral history program at Columbia University. And so at that point, I was looking for a project that dealt with the aspects of oral history. And to me, oral history is the foundation of all storytelling. It is the beginning and end, to me, of how you communicate story. And so when I saw that Erica Garner, Miss Carr's granddaughter, had passed away in December of 2017, something had spurred, there was an anger in me. Because I was like, why, how did she was 27 years old, and I'd heard that she had died right after, of a heart attack. And I tried to, we sort of realized that a lot of African-American women and die of sort of health-related issues, especially right after birth, right after childbirth. And so I wanted to sort of dig a little bit deeper into that. And so I called her grandmother. And I realized that I also wanted to understand the real people behind some of these big stories that we see. What happens to them, essentially, when the cameras go away? And what happens to them in their private, intimate moments after the cameras have gone away and the crowds have gone away, and they have to still deal with this trauma, this grief. And I wanted to really understand who she was and how she actually went through that process. And I guess you saw the result. The filming took 6 years. 6 years to do, and I did not expect it to go 6 years, but it did. And that was just the process we undertook.
I mean, were there times in that 6 years when you thought we're not going to finish this?
Oh, many times I thought that, and but Miss Carr was faithful the whole time. She was faithful the whole time, and so we were literally finishing it, or we were literally at the point where we thought we'd finished the film, and then all of a sudden there would be a breaking news event coming out, and not just one event, a slew of them would be coming out. And then we'd sit on that for like, how are we going to do this? And then another event would come out the next year. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. And we all know what happened with that. And so right after that, we decided to film again. And then we finally got to the point where we could actually end it. realizing that we had hundreds of hours of footage over years. And so as an oral historian, I realized that film to me is something where you can not only just shoot it and sort of forget about it like some people do, or sort of put it to the side. I want films to be education. And I want them to be able to continue to inspire years after they've been shot in so many different aspects and ways. And that's how we ended up at the place we are.
So, Betsy, you're known for making feature docs about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Gabby Gifford and Julia Child. What led you to a short doc on Ukraine?
Well, last spring, I was approached by the producer of this documentary, Earl Mack, who has a real passion for Ukraine because it's his ancestral home. And he really wanted to make a film about the experience of children in war. I think he understood that there's a lot of coverage of wars, but you don't often get to see what it's like as a kid to be living through this kind of a traumatic experience. So he had hired a fabulous camera crew to go around the country. Andrei Kalashnikov, Vova Sobotrovsky, and a few other people who went all around the country. They filmed a couple dozen families and children. And so he said, will you look at this material? And, you know, originally I thought, oh, okay, I'll just look at it for him. And then when I saw it, it just really moved me because I think it takes you to a place that you haven't seen before. And I think that's what makes a good doc, is to learn something, to see something, to be in a place that you haven't been or experienced before. And there was something universal to me about the experience of these children. And I said, yeah, I'd love to work on this.
Was it different to not be involved in the shooting part of it?
Yeah, it is an unusual situation. But I love being in an edit room. It's really fun, and just working on shaping material. And I was so grateful to this crew because they really, I thought, did a fabulous job. And they spent a lot of time with the children, and they also brought along a child psychologist to make sure that they weren't sort of re-traumatizing these children. So nobody was forced to talk, but they wanted to talk, it seems. And so I just felt very grateful to have this material to work with.
All right, well, let's go to the screen. John, first of all, John, I want to say about 20 years ago, I did several TV guide stories on Ghost Whisperer. So we talked on the set at Warner Brothers, I think, a few times quite a while ago. So it's good to see you again a little further away than.
So I was only about 12 or 13 at that time. It's amazing.
Right. And I was 6. So anyway, so what led you to, to want to make this the film that you made?
Well, we live here in New York, and Melissa and I often travel around town, via Uber or Lyft, or, sometimes even taxi cabs. And we always get in conversations with our drivers, and very often they're immigrants. And they always have the most fascinating stories about their lives. And we love to ask them about what brought them here, how long they've been here, what their circumstances are, how they like it. And we've always been amazed not only at the incredible level of gratitude that so many of these immigrants have, but also what they left behind, what so many of them left behind. We always hear these, I was an engineer, I was a pilot, I was a doctor. And so, that combined with this sort of philosophy that I've subscribed to, I guess, from a quote that I read years ago about, always be kind, and remember that everyone's fighting their own battle. And that's what I wish we would all keep in mind more, as we deal with each other, that we don't know what other people have gone through and been through, and we don't know their secrets, and we don't know ours. And So that's really what started it, and I just thought it would make a kind of an interesting short film.
Right. I mean, is it tricky when most of the film takes place in inside a cab?
Yes, it's very challenging. We decided to shoot it on a stage with a volume wall, LED screens, and that was very challenging and had a lot of, posed a lot of problems. But there was just no way on a film, with this budget and the time we had to really do tow rigs and go out on the streets and shoot this the way you might if you had, doing a big feature. Although I suppose almost everybody's doing things like this on LED walls now, which is so much better.
It really looks pretty close to real when you look at it.
Yeah, and it's much better
it was real.
Good,
Oh, good.
good. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's much better for the actors because they can concentrate on just performing and not having to, even though they're not driving anyway. But as opposed to doing green screen or something, they can see what's around them and they can react to it. And it's about trying to make it as cinematic as you can, even though you're basically got two people in the back seat and one person in the front seat, and just try to keep the pace as fast as you can, and just try to keep the cutting sharp.
Yeah. So Lily, how about you? I mean, what led you to Equal Play?
Yeah, so Robert Ford, who's the producer of the film and also worked on Christopher Reeve's story, the Superman film, he approached me and said, "Hey, we're we're producing this film. It's around the statistic of 75% of disabled kids in UK schools don't have regular access to PE." And I was like, "Oh, that's a depressing statistic." But honestly, I'm not really surprised, unfortunately, because essentially, like in my school back like 20 years ago, I also didn't have great access to PE and sport. Um, I think probably many disabled people can still say they don't have great access to physical activity. So yeah, that was pretty much the catalyst of me like pitching for the film, but also just thinking about like, hey, how does physical activity kind of relate to my everyday life, but also, these kids that have been going through it and continue to go through it now, and what kind of systemic things are happening in the world to limit uh, kids accessing it.
Right. I love the way the film incorporates animation at certain points. What led you to want to do that?
Yeah, so essentially the animated parts, I was really thinking like let's kind of go full into this kind of childlike wonder and really embody like creativity at its at its finest. Obviously I think animation kind of leads you to places that you wouldn't otherwise go in like with a camera. And I feel like it really puts you into the shoes of the protagonists of Marley and Tammy. You know, what were they going through in these like really difficult times? It's also, they're talking about past tense. So it's always really like helpful, I think, to imagine, what the past was like. Instead of like going to kind of a cheesy recreation or something, you can really visualize, what kids were going through.
Right. I mean, Betsy, you did the same a little bit in
Yeah.
your film.
Yeah, there's some similarities. I think, the kind of creativity and resilience that you sometimes might overlook, the kids have that this kid is fishing in a pond that's been made by a Russian bomb, and he thinks he's going to catch a fish there with all of the stuff behind. I mean, it's so sweet and kind of optimistic, or the girl who's writing a fairy tale, imagining that Ukrainian vegetables are going to be defeating the Russian troops. Kids, especially, I think at that age, are able to use their minds and their creativity to survive some really horrible experiences.
Yeah. I want to also talk about, for each of you, what were the biggest challenges of these films?
I think that when we went to go make it, we didn't have a massive budget. I think a lot of short films are that way. And so, but we also wanted not call in favors. We wanted to take care of our cast and crew and pay them for their time. And so that we basically, by doing that, had a day to make our film. So we shot that in 9 hours. And so that was a very tricky thing to do.
9 hours?
9 hours, yeah.
It's impressive.
Thank you. And so that was the biggest, thank you. That was the biggest challenge, was just one, trying to convince Clifton we could do it, and the crew a little bit. But that was the most significant challenge we faced. But and it paid off. I think it really helped shape the film.
Right. And Clifton is always great, but Clifton is so good in your film.
Yeah, we were talking about it in Jockey. I had seen Jockey the year before, and just basically the very end of that movie, there's like a 35-second wonder where he's just walking off into the credits. And it was the most powerful nonverbal acting I'd ever seen. And then so when I was writing this, I'm like, this has just got to be Clifton. And I'm not sure we would have done it if he, said he couldn't do it. I don't think there's an actor that could have done it. He's so special.
Did you tell him 9 hours at the beginning?
No, I said 3 days. I said we had 3 days to do this, 14 pages at that time. And no, he was very excited about 3 days.
Pretty impressive.
Ryan, what about for you? Besides the fact that it took 6 years to...
I'd say 6 years.
6 years. 6 years of the challenge, yo. But I think that the breaking news aspect was thing, because we'd be on micro budget. I'd be in Houston. She would be in New York, and I would have to find a way to cover that when I'm in Houston. Like, how do you cover her rally when she's going out, gonna just be on the streets, and you had about an hour to realize that she was gonna do that? But the most important thing is, how do you deal with the dignity of representing trauma was the challenge. And not just for Ms. Carr, but for the other women that we saw in the film as well. And I'll never forget when I had chatted with Queen Brown. She was the one saying that America is a very deadly place if you are an African-American child. She basically said to me later, I think just a few months ago, she's like, Brad, you didn't walk, like a lot of journalists or filmmakers or whatever, you didn't objectify us, you walked with us. And that was what I felt organically I had to do, and I think that at the end of the day, Ms. Carr has become my friend as a process of that. I didn't look at her as a documentary subject. I didn't look at her as an oral history subject. I looked at her as a person and my friend. And I think that's where we are at today. Like, she calls me up, hey, how you doing? In fact, she hasn't heard from me in like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something. And I check in on her. And I think that was part of a learning process and journey for me.
I feel like, and I mentioned this to you before, that I feel like your film really takes its tone from her, where this is a subject you could very easily approach in anger, but because she doesn't do that, the film itself is very placid in a lot of ways, and in ways that you wouldn't expect, because I guess it's the dignity you're talking about that she has.
Well, thank you. And that's part of that sort of oral history methodology we did, because oral history it's an old sort of it's old, but you can use it in so many new and emerging ways these days. And the fact is, sort of, I didn't want to film, and other people do that, and it's great, it's wonderful. But I didn't want this particular film to have a lot of experts and other people talking about her or talking about the larger movement. I wanted a film that represented what her perspective was like, so that by the time people finish watching it, they can identify with her as Gwen, as her memories and her ideas and her thoughts. And I think that was the challenge. That's why it took so long to be able to have a film that was accurately representing who she was, and that if it did not, in this film, if she was not in the room, it didn't make the film. Everything had to be from her perspective or when she was in the room, and that was the goal.
Betsy, how about for you, what were your biggest challenges?
Well, I have to be humble about this because the biggest challenge really was for the camera crew in capturing this material. And, they were going all around, including to the eastern area where there are now drones that hunt people down. It's a very scary situation. I talked to them and, afterward and expressed my admiration for the work that they'd done. And they said, well, it was actually a relief to do this because they have been working for the BBC and ITN and all the other news places going to the front and covering the war. And I think for them, it was a great relief. I don't know, pleasure is the right word, but in a way to spend time with the families and with the children. And so, they kind of brushed off my concerns about their safety because I guess they're there and they're filming all the time. And they said this was really important to them to do.
John and Melissa, for you, what were the biggest challenges?
Well, there are several. I mean, there's always money. That's always the big, how much time can we afford to do this? The car scenes, of course, as we discussed, were challenging. We also had to deal with trying to create some sense of Kampala, and how to do that without going there. And an odd kind of thing that I didn't anticipate was actually how to break down and shoot the interior car scenes. Because, most movies, you've got a 2-page scene, a 3-page scene, a 1-page scene, and you can sort of break down what you're going to shoot and cover. But here, there's basically a 10-page piece of dialogue that happens with these 3 people in a car. So we ended up just doing it. It seemed like no way to really break it up in a way that would work well, I thought, for the actors. So we just did the entire car scene like a play, just from start to finish, which the actors loved, at least until they had to do it 12 or 15 times. They loved it less. But that was a challenging thing to do for energy and just, for everybody to just keep, doing these 10 or 12-minute takes. And we had some technical issues with the screens and things that you hope not to have when you have so little money and you just want to spend all the time you possibly can creating and working with the actors and making something, and you find yourself having to wait for the screen's too high in the back, why the car is so high up there, all this kind of silly stuff.
I'm sure that'll get better, but yeah, no, I mean, when you're making films on this very small scale, it's anything that goes wrong. We had to do one short reshoot, and but that was enormous. I mean, that's huge for something that was so tightly budgeted, and it was just it was a camera glitch. I mean, it just didn't. We had to replace a lens, and it didn't get replaced on the set. So when you're doing these things, things like the fire marshal shows up and tries to kick you out, and I mean, it's like. It's not like doing a feature because those problems, usually you work them out in advance. But when you're sort of running, gunning, and you're like, okay, we scouted the location, we walked through it, and then we show up. And then that's when the problems arrive. So it was, I wouldn't say it was the most challenging of the shorts that we've done, but it was intense. It was very intense.
Right. Lily, what about you? I mean, what were your biggest challenges on Equal Play?
I think our biggest challenges were finding accessible locations to film in, and also going into like distribution and screenings, finding accessible cinemas to show in. We shot most of it in London, where I'm based. And you think with you could film people in. That is not the case. Ooh, it says my internet is unstable. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think that I think it just shows that like, cinema's not being accessible. Some cinemas were kind of coming back to us and saying, oh, only like, two wheelchair users can be in a cinema at a time. And I'm like, okay, well, if if Hannah Cockcroft and Tammy are in the cinema, that's, sorry, no other wheelchair users can come. That's kind of ridiculous, right? How are you going to get people into the cinema to watch your films? I feel like, you know, uh, hopefully this is becoming a bigger conversation in the film community. How can we make our films more accessible for everyone to watch them? The disabled community is roughly like 20% of the population. So it's a huge area of people like being essentially left out. Um, and they want to see films too. Um, so yeah, I think that those were two really big issues that we ran into.
I mean, did you come out of it feeling hopeful for progress being made?
I mean, I'm always hopeful. I think I'm kind of an optimist. I try to be at least. I think there is very, there's like really great groups out there like Forward Doc, who y'all might know, which is run by Jim Lebrecht. He's one of the co-founders of it. Um, and there's a lot of like great resources in the UK here, like DDP TV, which is Deaf and Disabled People TV, and DANK with a C, not a K. But yeah, I feel like the like disabled filmmaking community, I feel like probably we as a people are very resilient and very, pushing towards change. But I think it's ultimately, you gotta preach. You can't just preach to the choir. You gotta like reach out. Um, so yeah, I'm still hopeful.
I mean, in a certain, as I was watching all five of these films, there was in a certain way, Dwayne, yours was the first that I watched, and the first thing we see on your film is a quote from Princess Mononoke, that says, "Life is suffering, life is hard, the world is cursed, but still you find a reason to keep living." And I feel like there's a little bit of that in every single one of these films.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty aware of the fact that I didn't want this horrible tragedy unfolding right now in Ukraine, and and in the Middle East and in other war zones all around the world. And certainly we have to acknowledge that. But I also wanted to tell a story that just wasn't completely depressing. And when you see these kids who have this human spirit, I felt that that was, a realistic portrayal of how they are finding ways to have hope and to be optimistic in the face of a pretty tough situation.
And it's similar. I was trying to find a way, when you see these stories, like I said, you don't really know what the impact of these families will be after you've turned your TV off or just stopped even caring about the story. But there's a ripple effect. There continues to be a ripple effect in so many different ways. And the challenge we had here was she has these photos in her house, and she kept the photos she had on the wall are the only memories she has of her family, because she had a fire a few years before that. And so we were trying to find ways to use the photos as a conduit for memory, and then showing that she uses the memory for two purposes. One, to prevent from going to this dark place in her own mind. And she meditates. She has this meditation trick where she holds his photo or looks at his photo, and she does that privately. And then secondly, she uses memory, or gets the photos to memory, to find a way to become an activist, as a fuel for activism, and to be able to fight that you saw her do. That's how she does it. And so that was the challenge we did. How do you show someone's will on screen? And that's a tough thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, John, I feel like you don't start in the dark place, but you certainly end up there. Um, I mean, was that idea of, sort of emerging from the darkness, which your character is trying to do, was that a reason to make this?
Yeah, I mean, it also goes back to this idea of gratitude, which is a big part of our lives, and it's something that we're always, as I said before, we're always struck by with so many of the people that we meet in the immigrant community, who are just so happy to be safe and to be here, and regardless of what they might have given up in terms of careers and sometimes finances, and for this character, this guy really does struggle, to try to stay positive. And when something like this happens, you're with two people who believe that they're right thinking people. They believe that they can make all the right noises and say all the right things from their bubble. But at the end, they're just, more frightened human beings who don't really know how to go forward, except in just this kind of prescribed way. So, for him, I'd like to visit that guy again, like the day after this happened, and just see, how he's getting his head around what just happened. This life that's lost, and he's had so much loss in his own life. And so, yeah, I just, it does get a bit dark, and again, it just it goes back to hoping that we can have a little more empathy for people that we meet and deal with. We don't know what their stories are.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we have people here who've worked in features, people who've worked in TV. What is the value and what is the appeal of short form in this day and age?
I fell in love with cinema at the end of '80s and very much in the '90s, and it was the independent spirit of cinema at that time. And I feel like shorts are that right now. Like, I think it's a place where you can be innovative, where you can tell a story that's not a 3 act structure tailored to a certain like a wide demographic. You can go tell the story you want to tell. And I think you can tell it the way you want to tell it. And I think it's a really powerful tool. It wasn't something that I was super familiar with going into it. And then as I got into it, I started, as we wrote the script and we were going into production on it, I started watching other shorts and I just fell in love with the format. And it's my favorite. Like, it's such a really cool space. And you go to the festivals and you see so many different types of diverse storytellers and diverse stories. It's truly, I think it's going to be, I think a lot of people are wanting more texture and more art in the theater, and this is a great place for it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that an audience is really up for seeing new ideas, but maybe not for 100 minutes, And I think, short form and all of these films, you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's not as if you're completely giving up the storytelling, but I think you have to be really aware of what the audience is going to be able to take in a way, and so short form can be more creative.
Yeah, I graduated from education school in May, and one of the reasons I went was because I wanted to find ways to use film as a conduit for education and for so many different social issues. Disability is another love of mine as a subject, because I believe that everyone on some level is touched by it. And I think that when you can find a way to show, and the short form is easier to do that to me in many ways than the long form. And so you can package that in many ways, and especially with our attention deficit culture, it's a really good way to be able to educate in bite-sized chunks, so that people can sort of take whatever they want from that and use it and inspire in their own lives. So,
when we go into festivals, every time all the short blocks are always sold out. I think there's an audience for short films that is entirely untapped, because people love them, and it's not like it's just the filmmakers. I mean, every festival is packed to the rafters for shorts, and I just think they like the variety. They like the idea that, okay, if I don't like this one, it's going to be over in 4 minutes. but But you go in there and like I don't know, but the way I approach every movie is I want to love it, so I go in with that vision. But I think it's the community of people who make short films is really wonderful, and we feel lucky to be able to be doing this now.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's become a way to stay creative. This can become as a shock for some of you, but when you get older in this business, the opportunities kind of narrow, and the phone doesn't ring as much as you'd like it to. And so, for us, that we've been doing this for a long time, and in many ways, I always joke that after 30 some odd years, I feel like I'm kind of getting the hang of it, and I don't want to stop doing it. So these short films are a way for us to keep doing that, to keep doing what we love. We love working together, and to keep working with actors we love and crew that we love. And we go and take them to film festivals, and we do seminars, and it's just for us, short film. The whole world has been a great thing for us, and it's kind of back to my roots in many ways.
Oh, I just wanted to add that I think, yeah, going off of John's thing, I think it's really great to, get your foot in the door, really. It's shorter, so it's accessible. The budget is, you still spending money on stuff. But I think for a lot of like younger filmmakers, it's just a kind of way to, dip your toe in the water, kind of see what's out there, go to festivals and meet a lot of your peers that are, that you wouldn't otherwise meet. So yeah, I just love shorts.
Well, I think we all do, and on that note, I'm afraid we have to wrap up. Betsy, you have a plane to catch, so thank you all, and thank you guys up there.
Thank you so much.